because some of the executive functions of our brains are shut down, it doesn't make a person into a walking idiot, right?
That's correct.
They're able to function, aren't they?
Depends on how you're defining function.
Well, they're able to continue walking around.
Yes, gross motor movement is continued to be seen.
All right. And they're able to defend themselves, aren't they?
And what do you mean by defend themselves?
Survive.
They're able to survive if it's successful.
Yes. They're able to do that, right?
If it's successful.
Well, they're able to attempt to survive, right?
Attempt to survive, yes.
Okay. And by attempting to survive, they're able to attempt to defend themselves.
Objection, the also the court's ruling.
Approach, please.
All right. So when we go into this fight or flight mode, right? The whole point is to survive.
That's correct.
Okay. And so when that means that the ability that we still as humans have the ability to defend ourselves, right?
If that's the mechanism that's being used, there's fight or flight.
Right. So if flight isn't going to work and the person has to stay and fight, that's the point of this whole mode within our brains to be able to attempt to defend ourselves, right?
What typically happens is that they engage in either fight or flight.
Right. I know that. But what I'm saying is that when we're talking about if we're not going to fight, if there's no flight, then we're talking about fight. So if we're talking about fight, that means that our brains are intended so that we can attempt to defend ourselves, right?
Yes.
Okay. When the hippocampus gets flooded with these neurotransmitters, at some point, these neurotransmitters are going to recede from the brain and kind of go away after a while, right? Go back to normal levels.
Yes.
And when that happens, the hippocampus, you're not telling us that the hippocampus is destroyed, right?
When they go back to normal?
Yeah, once the neurotransmitters kind of recede and your brain starts to function in a normal sense again, the hippocampus is generally still intact, right?
What I explained before was that if there's prolonged exposure, that you can see damage. But typically when it does drop to normative levels, you don't see continued damage.
Okay. So on direct, you talked about seeing atrophy, right?
Yes.
And so you're saying that when the hippocampus is under prolonged levels of these neurotransmitters, then you start to see atrophy?
That it's possible to see atrophy.
And is that something that happens a lot?
No.
Okay. And when the hippocampus atrophies, that's when people tend to have long-term memory problems, right?
That's when they have difficulty through the encoding process, taking new information and encoding it into long-term memory.
All right. And when you talk about atrophy, that's something that we see in diseases like, diseases that cause memory issues, like Alzheimer's, right?
That's one area.
Okay. And with atrophy, though, I know that you noted on direct that you didn't notice any type of atrophy issues with Miss Arias's hippocampus, right? You didn't see any evidence of that?
I certainly did not examine her hippocampus. I don't have the ability to do that. What I said was that I did not see any continued memory problems that would be suggestive of an atrophied hippocampus.
All right. So you're not